Well, thank you very much. So we're all in marketing and advertising, and I think we've all heard the story of a couple of colleagues sitting down at a bar, and they get excited about a marketing or advertising idea, and they start scratching out notes on a set of bar napkins. And then they're really excited about the idea. A couple of drinks later, they wake up in the morning, and then they actually look at the bar napkins and they think, holy shit, this is a great idea. Let's go do this. I wasn't at the bar, unfortunately. It's a bar right here in Los Angeles, TKT. But I was the guy that called after they had the idea. They took the napkin and they said, we want to go do this. And so the story I'm going to tell you today is a case study for Ford. And they were launching a vehicle, and they wanted to target millennials. So what I'm going to talk about is a little bit about what they did, what we did to launch the vehicle, how we targeted millennials, and then specifically I'm going to show you some results on sales numbers and impression numbers. And then finally I'm going to walk you through 6 things that we did that I think helped a lot to really reach and influence millennials. And maybe it'll help with some of the campaigns that you're working on. I will first start with Tom Grill and Don Was. The guy on the left with his arms crossed is Tom Grill. He's a Western Market Sales Marketing Manager for Ford. And the guy with the dreads and the shades, that's Don Was. He's a legendary producer, Rolling Stones, Bonnie Raitt, Stone Temple Pilots, John Mayer, and a bunch of other folks. And he's just a legend in the music business. And these are the guys that were having a drink at TKT. And in talking a little bit, they started talking about the Ford Focus. And they were launching the Ford Focus, and Tom was talking about how he really wanted to get the word out in a new and different way. And he turned the attention to Don, and he asked him what he was working on. And he said, the record business, the music business is changing so much. And he was still looking for different ways to sort of innovate in the music business. And he was now the president of Blue Note Records. And then finally, Don asked Tom, who are you targeting with the new vehicle? He goes, we've got such tough competition with Toyota and Honda, all the other vehicles, because we want to go after millennials. We really want to reach these guys in a new and a different way. And that struck a chord with Don. Because Don said, music is just a universal thing that sort of connects everybody. It's really strong with the younger group. And he said, by the way, there's nobody I like to work with more than young artists, because they're just super passionate about what they're doing. They're excited about their music. And he said, what if we can figure out a way to collaborate? What if we can figure out a way that's bigger than a battle of the bands kind of thing that's been done before? How do we really take the strength of the brand and do something with unsigned artists, these younger artists that are unsigned? And so they talked a little bit more about it. And so Tom ended up asking Don, what if we went out and we did all these events around the Western market? What if we used our resources at Ford to find unsigned, real passionate artists? And so they wrote down on the back of a napkin, give me the gig. And Don said, what I'll do is I'm going to go and produce not one, but all 3 of these bands, find the best bands, unsigned bands in the Western United States, and I'll personally do it, introduce them to the guys at Blue Note Records, and let's really try and change these guys' lives. Let's give these guys something that they could probably never get without something like this. And so he had a ton of passion, and I want to share probably the first principle, but I'll let Tom sort of share something right now. Tom Grow. So Tom had all this tremendous passion for music, and he's talking to Don, and finally he calls him the next morning. He goes, hey, I got a problem. Is if we just do this really cool band thing and we're finding all these unsigned artists, I got to figure out a way to really get the vehicle integrated in here, but in a cool way, not in sort of an awkward way. Let's do something fun. Let's do something different. And so Don came up with a really interesting idea. He said, okay, you guys are going to be doing events, and you guys are going to have all these events where you're going to be out, talking to bands. What if we actually took the entire recording studio and stuck it in the car, stuck it in the Ford Focus, so we could bring the Ford Focus out there, get people around the Ford Focus, and experience it for the first time, and actually record some of these bands right from the car. And so that's what they did. They said, okay, well, who do you know that can do that? And so they assembled one more person on the team. I'm delighted to have him here today. He works with Don. He's a producer with the Rolling Stones. He was the sound guy that put it all together. Okay, so what are the elements of the campaign? So the dream team's assembled. We got the elements of the campaign. There's really some basic elements of the campaign that you guys have seen before. There was a sweepstakes, an opportunity to get produced by Don Was. There was some TV appearances. They were with KTLA, and they were going to do like a live broadcast of the winners. The second thing was a basic website. There was a video submission platform, a really cool video submission platform that let bands post the videos online, let the fans share and things like that. There was also social media. I'll go into that a little bit more. Some of the basics. By the way, who else heard of Ustream? Most everybody? Or about 30%. Okay, 30-ish%, 40%. Okay, so we used Ustream to do some live streaming on the Facebook page. I'll share a little bit about that, and event activations. So the elements were pretty standard type of approaches, but along the way, we learned some really cool things. So now let's start to get into the six things that we learned along the way. Real fast, mutual benefits. We had, for the bands, obviously, a really cool opportunity to get produced, live TV appearances, publicity, and it was a good way for them to invigorate their audience. And then for Ford, it was a bullseye with this real target audience of millennials. If they could get bands across the Western United States excited about it, reach out to their fan base, it'd be a home run for them. They'd be the brand ambassadors. It'd be great exposure for Ford Focus. And then finally, on the back end, we ended up creating sort of a lead or a test drive platform on the back end so that if somebody was interested in a Ford Focus, they could fill out some information, some in-market timing, and get it down to a dealer. Okay, so high level, here's what we accomplished, and I'm going to go through some of the sales numbers as well, and I'll reveal as much as I can that'll give you a really good idea of what we actually accomplished. It was a 9-month campaign, so it wasn't a 60-day sales event, or it wasn't a 60-day just sort of a quick launch. It was a 9-month campaign. We ended up generating a little over 2,500 band submissions, 75 million impressions owned, earned, and paid, 2.1 million event impressions, and then finally we produced 3 one-hour specials. So we had some pretty good sort of awareness of what was going on in the community, but the real success was on the back end. We had some awards. On the back end, we had 30,000 vehicle hand raisers. So we had 30,000 people raise their hand and say, hey, I'm interested in more information about the Ford Focus. We had about 19,500, a little bit less than 19,500 test drives. So the gentleman that's talking about incentives, we really played with incentives a lot with this campaign. I'll share some of the key things that we found on that. 843 new vehicles sold, new Fords sold, 30 from one band's fan base. So we gave the bands unique links to track their activity, and it was a really cool opportunity for us because when we would capture leads, we would take all those leads and we'd bounce them up against Polk, and Polk has access to the DMV records, and we'd see who bought Fords, who bought other cars, who bought Toyotas, who bought Hondas, and so we saw a lot about who was buying the vehicles. Finally, 6 things. Now we're getting on to the 6 things that we learned. These were things that we learned kind of along the way sometimes, and hopefully they make sense to you. The first one was, as you saw before, we needed to launch a movement. If we were going to connect with millennials, we really had to do something that would connect with them, and so we kind of settled on the idea there's a movement, not a campaign. Tom, Krish, and Don obviously care a lot about music. It's a real passionate thing for them. And so it wasn't a surprise when we finally went offline and we went out to events. Tom and Krish and Don, we actually went to the events. We took the vehicle out there. And so imagine you're an unsigned artist and you get to hang out with Don Was, even if it's for 15 minutes, and hear stories about the Rolling Stones and sort of listen to his music. It was a really cool thing where we started getting a lot of notes back on the website, on the Facebook page. Holy cow, I met Don Was and Krish and all these guys. It was an awesome experience. So we went offline to 46 different events, 85 live performances, and 2.1 million event impressions. So the second point is here, first have a passion for it. Make sure it connects with theirs. Go offline, go out and be with the audience that you want to interact with. With events was really cool for us. And obviously thinking mobile is obvious. A few years ago, it wasn't as obvious, at least at the time when we were launching this campaign. But I want to suggest there's something even more than thinking mobile. It's about playing with different technologies in a way that isn't so much that you pushing the information out to them, but for these guys, for the bands, it wasn't about us. They couldn't have cared less about our car or anything about us. So we looked at it a little bit differently. Our site, if I could do it all over again, I'd probably do it a little bit differently. But our site, I want to show you just one thing. We looked at technology as a way not to get our message out, but to get their message out. So we decided from the outset that all the stuff was going to be user-generated content. The video submission platform that we built were all their videos and allowed their fans and their friends to share. All the tweets and the twit pics were stuff that they were posting. All the Facebook newsfeed was all their comments. And the blog, I'll share a little bit more about the blog, but that was on the homepage as well. We had fan galleries. We had a lounge. I think we called it Give Me the Gig Lounge or something like that. And ultimately, this is kind of cool. We had about 500,000 visits. Now, we barely had any media. And I will say this, the cost of this was about a quarter of the cost of a national spot, about a quarter of the cost of a national broadcast spot. So we were really on a shoestring budget. So the whole thing was we had to rely on all of their media, them driving organic traffic. So we had about 500,000 visits to the site. And then when I mentioned Ustream, we noticed right away at these events, they said, hey, do you guys ever do AMAs? And if I'm being perfectly honest, at the time, I didn't know what an AMA is. Do you guys know what an AMA is? AMA? Couple. Ask me anything. All right. So I didn't know at the time. And they said, hey, you guys do AMAs? And I said, sure. What's an AMA? And they said, well, we want to, get our word out about our band. And so one of the folks at my agency said, hey, let's post it right on the Facebook page. We'll do a note out to everybody, free post. And we'll go get a note out to everybody, maybe send an email out to everybody, and let them know that we're going to do a live interview on the Facebook page. So our Facebook fans would swell, traffic would swell, entries would swell, because the bands themselves would go out and tell everybody. So we did 40 or 50 or 60. I mean, we would do AMAs with darn near anybody on different days. Super simple. It was free. I mean, it's a free plug-in, but it drove an enormous amount of traffic to the site. This was probably the smartest thing that the clients at Ford did. If everybody here is obviously on the agency side or on the client side or in your media, every dollar seems to be has to be accounted for when you're putting a project together. You get an RFQ, you put your deliverables together, you put your budgets together, and everything has to be accounted for when it goes through purchasing. Well, we actually put a little slush fund called media, but we knew that we weren't going to use it for media. In fact, the truth is we didn't know what we were going to use it for, but we just knew that there was going to be some unknowns that would come up. And this is the best thing we did. It was like a 10 or 15% little slush fund that we just set aside. And we didn't know what we'd use it for, but we used it for a couple of things I thought were really cool. One was after doing all these AMAs and all these interviews, we had a writer at the office, a part-time writer. He came in and he said basically, hey, why don't I draft up all these 40 or 50 AMAs that you're doing, and since it's 10 things you don't know about this band and this band, I can create these blogs and we'll post them on the site. Super easy to do, and we'll let everybody know that now there's a blog available about the band. Again, traffic would swell. We'd post these things, super cheap to do, but we had a little bit of a slush fund to do what we needed to do. This was probably the coolest thing. That meant a lot. So remember, we're out at all these events. We're doing all these AMAs. We're doing all these connections with bands. And remember, these guys are young, starving artists, so their guitar is broken, their mic is broken, their drum sets are broken. So we'd find these really cool stories of people that were struggling artists, and even if they didn't win, it didn't matter. We'd go out and we'd send them a drum set, or we'd send them a guitar, or send them a mic stand, or whatever it was. We'd send them stuff, and you could see the letters coming back. I'll show you some samples in a second. The impact it was having on these guys, and it wasn't that much money, but it really made a difference to these young, starving artists. Which leads me to finally the next one. The whole goal is how do you really engender yourself to the millennials or connect with the market? You have to add massive value. You have to really add value. You can't just sell them stuff, obviously. So we actually really tried to add massive and unexpected value. And this is a really cool one that I never would have thought. I would have never thought. So about 2 or 3 weeks after the campaign had launched, this is the McRockin crew. It was the idea of one of the folks at my agency. What he noticed was whenever we would go home, 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, whatever it was, 9 o'clock at night, that's when the Facebook pages would light up. That's when the Twitter stuff would light up. That's when everybody would be doing blogging and all this stuff would happen. When I'd be going to put my kids to bed, this is when stuff was happening. And so he actually did it on his own. He created a profile called McRockin. He became the personality that was behind the Ford thing. And he started talking to all the bands. And then when he'd go to bed, he'd turn it over to somebody else. When that person would wake up, and they do it on the weekends and at night. So we literally had like a 12, 15, 18-hour window when we were talking to people. The funny thing is there's so much, understandably, concern about the language that's used and the tone that's used, especially for a brand like Ford and stuff. We had a wonderful client who said, listen, you're connecting with everybody. Just keep going. Just keep going. I didn't even know they did this until a few weeks in, and we found all this content coming back to us because they love McRockin. And then when we'd have events, rather than being super excited, obviously they're excited to talk to guys like Don Was, but almost every single band would say, where's McRockin? I want to meet McRockin, because they'd have relationships with them. So that was really, really cool. And that was a response to their needs, not ours. These are some of the tweets and art that we got. It's like really cool brands like Harley Davidson, and you're connecting with somebody where there's art and tattoos about your logo. We got some really amazing things where people started generating art to say, like, we sent them a guitar and they'd say thank you and create this really cool art thing, or send us videos thanking Ford for their generosity. So we started getting really cool tweets back. And the final one is this. It's just in my final minute here, incentives. We were really fortunate. I mentioned at the beginning we generated about 30,000 folks who raised their hand and said they wanted to get more information on the Ford Focus. I'll tell you a little bit about what we did with test drive incentives. The first thing I want to do is, it was really simple. We looked at the videos that the bands were submitting, and we said, hey, what if we gave bonus votes for sharing? And so it was a real simple thing. We called our attorney, we rewrote some rules, and we said, hey, what if we added some incentives to sharing videos? So we did that, and as soon as we said to the fans, hey, you can get your favorite band more votes by sharing from the website with a unique link, the traffic started to skyrocket. The second thing we said is, okay, how do we align incentives so we can get people to learn about the Ford Focus, but in a way that is totally optional? We didn't want to make it in their face, but we also did want to give them the opportunity to learn more about the Ford Focus. We said, watch your favorite band's video, and if you'd like, for bonus votes for your favorite band, watch a short video on the Ford Focus, answer a trivia question, really basic one that reinforced a key selling proposition of the vehicle, and then your band gets 5 or 10 votes, whatever it was. We did that, and of course the views started to skyrocket, and Ford was excited. We said, geez, 200,000 views for the video, and the views kept going up and up and up. The final one was this. With about 30,000 hand raisers, we looked at different in-market timing, 30 days in market, 60 days in market, 90 days in market. So we started serving different test drive offers, and that was, I think, one of the successful things that drove so many test drives. We kept talking to the dealers, making sure we were sending good folks down. They were excited, so we kept playing with those incentives, and it really helped drive qualified traffic, and we sent incentives to folks who were interested in it. That's it. The last thing is this, is if you're out to reach millennials, at least for our campaign on the Ford side, the keys were start a movement, be really passionate about it, and it's got to start at the top. If you're not, you and I both know we've done that where the passion isn't there. If you can connect with that, it makes a huge difference. Go offline, really go offline with the audience. Think more than mobile, test different things. We're testing some Periscope stuff right now. Hold a reserve, that was key for us to take advantage of all the unknown unknowns. Add unexpected and massive value whenever you can in a way that was meaningful to the audience, and then finally test different incentives. Thanks so much.